Welcome to the Antisocial Raider, where all we do is talk football. My name is Steady, and today I got another one like the other one, man. This morning, the NFL owners meeting continued where Raiders head coach Klint Kubiak was seen talking to reporters where they talked about a number of things, right? And I wanted to get into a little bit about, what was asked, what was said. But before we get started, I want to play a little clip for you all so you can all see what was actually said by Klint Kubiak.
What is it about the 3-4 defense that you knew, hey, this is really what I want, and that Robbie was on board? Will you talk about that, what the Raider Nation's going to see moving forward with that, please?
Yeah, I think any time you can play a five down front versus a base defense, and you get five good rushers going after a quarterback. I think that's tough. So playing against that scheme, I think it's very multiple. But Robbie is not just a 3-4 coach. He's going to be in basically a 4-2 under or 5 on line of scrimmage. He's going to get to 4 down in sub situations. I think he's got a lot of variety in his scheme. But we don't want to start by being coaching too much variety. We want to get good at a few things at this time of year, so that when things get hectic during the season, we got something to hang our hat on.
You talked about
For the past couple of months, there's been a certain level of curiosity amongst Raider fans about what this defense is really going to look like right now. I think, when Kubiak came out and said, we're going to be a 3-4 base defense, everybody, including me, we all jumped on, 3D linemen, 4 linebackers, which really that's more of a personnel. Now, in the video, as you all seen, he mentioned a 5-man front. He mentioned a 4-man front. He also mentioned a 4-2 nickel package. Now, the thing with all of those combined is that you can do all of those with the same personnel. And I think that's really one of the most important things with a defense in modern day NFL, right? Can you be multiple? Can you be flexible with your scheme? You know what I mean? If you run a base defense and, in order to combat something else, you have to switch out your personnel, that's going to get you in trouble 9 times out of 10, right? Who did it a lot? The offensive coordinator for Washington, Cliff Kingsbury, was very, very good at catching defenses off guard, right? Catching them in the wrong personnel. So being able to be multiple, being able to do a lot of different things with your base set of players, that's going to be very important, right? So a 3-4, what I got from the video, right now, this is Rob Leonard's first year as a defensive coordinator, right? First year with the Raiders. So naturally, when you first get to a team, it doesn't matter if it's your first time being a coordinator or what. When you first get to a team, your installment you want it to be your foundation, your foundational principles, right? What your defense, the backbone of your defense, right? The identity of your defense. And I think that more so that's what he meant at first about 3-4, right? The principles of a 3-4. Now, Patrick Graham, when he turned into more of a nickel-based defense, he used more of an even front to where the D linemen were in charge of 2 gaps, right? You're playing head up, and now you're in charge of, the gap to your left, the gap to your right. I think that's going to be the main difference with this defense. Whether they're in an odd front or an even front, or whether they're in a 5-man front or a 4-man front, I think it's going to be more so 1 gap or maybe a gap and a half rather than 2 gap control, right? I went back and I looked at Patrick Graham's defense when he first got to the Raiders, and he actually ran a 3-4 defense. 3-4 personnel, but the principles that he had at the beginning were the same principles he used when he switched to more of his nickel-based defense, right? And I think that's what it's going to be this time. It's the same as every other coordinator, right? When you first get to a team, you want to install your principles as a defense or offense, whatever it may be. And I think that's more so it's the concept based out of a 3-4, right? Based off controlling one gap, right? And with that, you incorporate the linebackers, right? In Patrick Graham's nickel base, the linebackers were more so in coverage, right? So they didn't have to worry about any playing any gaps, right? That was solely on the defensive lineman controlling two gaps, right? This I think is going to be a lot different. This I think is going to be more of one gap. Each player has control of their own gap, right? And then the linebackers are in that, whether you're playing the run or playing the blitz. And that's what's so intriguing about this, because the way that if you're doing this, then that means that you're going to be very aggressive, right? You're going to be aggressive in your blitz packages. You're going to be creative with how you structure your fronts. For me, that was the biggest takeaway, right? Now, whether you're in a 3-4, 4-2, whether you're in a 5-man front, 4-man front, the most important thing is that you can make it all look the same, right? There's a lot of times where you watch a game and you can have a big nickel in and he's like lined up by the linebackers. You can't really tell, like, is he playing the slot? Is he playing linebacker? Is he just a big nickel? Like, those are some of the best defenses, right? Where you can do things like that with the players that you have and make it look so many different ways, right? I even went back and watched Georgia's defense. You know what I mean? I went and watched, how their 3-4 was used. Dan Lanning was the defensive coordinator at the time. But just to get a sense of how, the linebackers are going to be used, right? Because, they were brought here for a reason. It's been said, the way that the way that Quay Walker is going to be used was a big reason why he came here, right? So I just went back to go look to maybe get an idea, and it is kind of what I thought it was going to be. Now, the weakness, in my opinion, the weakness that lies within this defense, it's going to fall on the defensive back coach, right? I believe his name is Joe Woods. I believe he was here last year. I believe he was the defensive back coach last year, and also obviously the defensive pass game coordinator. Now, if you didn't watch a lot of games last year, the coverage was, of course Eric Stokes did his thing, but as an overall unit, that shit was horrible. You know what I mean? There were games where I'm just shaking my head, bro. Like I'm at a loss for words. Like I don't even know what's going on right now. You know what I mean? People just look so confused, right? And part of that was due to linebackers that just don't know how to cover. And I think part of that was due to a change in scheme, right? A change in coverage. At the beginning years of Patrick Graham's tenure with the Raiders, he ran a lot of basic coverages, right? He ran a lot of basic 1, basic 2, basic 3. He didn't run a lot of complex coverages. And that was one of the main differences from last year versus the previous years, right? Since he was here last year, I do expect for them to do the same thing, right? If you were the DB coach last year, if you were the defensive pass game coordinator last year, and you have the same job this year, most of the players are the same. Of course, we have different linebackers, but it's for the better because they are better at coverage than fucking Elandon Roberts and whatever his name was, man. It's going to come down to whether the players have been able to grasp the concept, but just their overall role in the coverage, right? Because it's hard. It is very, very difficult to go from a basic cover scheme to a more complex scheme, right? To go from, easy cover 1 to now learning match concepts, right? It's very, very difficult. especially for, linebackers who aren't used to doing those types of things, man. So I am very excited about this defense. I am excited. For me, the one knock that I had against Patrick Graham's defense is the passive nature, right? I cannot stand passive defenses, right? I love aggressive defenses. It seems to me that this is going to be an aggressive defense. I think that, the problems lie in coverage, but, if the DB coach is good enough to bring back, then he should be able to have the guys all on the same page going into year 2, right? You had a whole year. You made all your mistakes last year. Now it's time to clean all that up, and get on the same page, man. So I think that, that little information that Kubiak gave at the owners meeting, man, it says a lot, man. And that has me fired up, man. Another thing that I wanted to get into, man, is something else that Klint Kubiak mentioned during this meeting, man. Take a look and then we'll get into it.
Klint, since you got the job, you've had to really study your roster, and I'm just curious, what's been the biggest pleasant surprise that maybe you didn't from the outside see about the Raiders?
Yeah, one guy that sticks out is, watching Tre Tucker play football. He's kind of everything that we're about, the way that his play style, how good of a teammate that he is. He's one of those guys like Maxx. There's about 25 guys that are there working out with AJ 4 days a week, 5 days a week right now. So there's already a culture of hardworking guys in our building. He's an example of one of them.
He's not the traditional size of a receiver you like, but he certainly has the heart that you covet. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah. Yes, sir. Absolutely. And I think that every team I've ever been on, there's just players that surprise you, And like, for instance, last year, Jax, he wasn't supposed to be an outside receiver. I thought he did a pretty good job last year. So you just finding what guys do best and trying to use their abilities to help the team.
So as you can see, Klint Kubiak was asked about a certain player that he was surprised about, that maybe he didn't know much about coming into the Raiders building, right? And it was interesting, man. He ended up naming wide receiver Tre Tucker. It's kind of interesting to me because Tre doesn't get a lot of acknowledgement from anybody outside of the Raiders organization, anybody in mainstream media, and it's also a surprise because I've been seeing a lot of stuff on Twitter about Tre Tucker possibly being on the trade block right now. By what Klint Kubiak said, I'm pretty sure we can all just, forget about the trade block. Now, there is a difference if a team gives, draft capital that you just can't refuse. But seeing that, Tre Tucker has yet to have his true breakout year, I don't see that happening right now. In regards to Tre Tucker and this offense, right, in the video, really all he mentioned was, being surprised by who Tre Tucker is as a person, being surprised by his work ethic, right? But I wanted to talk a little bit about how Tre Tucker fits in this offense, right? What's going to be his role with what we all know about Klint Kubiak's offense? How do you see Tre Tucker fitting in this offense? Is he going to be more of a Rashid Shaheed type of role, right? Where, you're the guy who stretches the defense, right? Is he going to be more of a slot, right? What do you all think his role is going to be given the skill set that he has, man? Tre Tucker is somebody that I've always liked since the day he was drafted, right? I didn't really know about him coming out of college, but once he got to the facility, once he started practicing, it's easy to tell, man. He's a good player, right? He runs his routes very well. He catches the ball very well, especially after he got his eye surgery, right? He did have trouble before that, but it seems to me that, wearing contacts can be very uncomfortable in football, right? So for him to get that eye surgery, I think it helped a lot, man. He has great hands. He has very good speed. The thing with Kubiak's offense, and if you look at New Orleans, right? Look at New Orleans, and then look at from when he was in Seattle. Now the run game is the same, right? His own run scheme, that's going to be the same, right? But as far as the passing goes, the passing game goes, I want to say concepts, but the players, okay, the personnel that he had, and then how these players were used, right? You can just take out Rashid Shaheed because it's the same player and the same offense, sort of being used the same way, right? But then you look at Chris Olave, and then you look at JSN. Those two are pretty much kind of the same player, right? A little bit different, but sort of the same. Just the whole structure of the passing game was a little different, and it was different because the personnel, right? So I think that's the big question mark, right? How is because Tre Tucker is not like Rashid Shaheed. Tre Tucker, I can't compare Tre Tucker to anybody on Seattle, and I can't compare him to anybody on New Orleans. So it's kind of a question, like how is he really going to be used? And the one thing that I know about Kubiak's offense is that it is a scheme based offense, right? And you heard him say it in the at the owners meeting, right? It is his job to scheme these guys open, right? No matter what team you go to, right? Not every team is going to have a true X. Not every team is going to have a true slot. Not every team is going to have a pass catching tight end. Not every team is going to have a traditional blocking tight end, right? But you have to make do with what you got. It's not that Tre Tucker doesn't fit in the offense because, like I said, it's a scheme based offense. I'm more curious about how he's going to find ways to get him open. So it's like you can run certain routes with him to best suit his skill set, man, and to incorporate him with Brock Bowers, with Jack Best, with Jalen Neller, and then incorporate all that, with the already dominant run game that we're gonna have, man. It's crazy. But man, I wanted to share that video. I hope you like this video, man. That's gonna do it for this one. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope that you learned something. I hope that you were able to gain some perspective in some way, shape, or form. This is the Antisocial Raider. If you love football like I love football, man, go ahead and subscribe. If you like the content, then like the content. If you got something you want to get off your chest, then drop a comment. Yeah.